Thank you. Oh, there we go. Thank you so much, Betsy, and good morning. Today marks the holiday of Easter in the Christian calendar. As a child, I dressed up for Easter, often with a new hat, and attended Easter Mass, relieved that Lent was finally over and a basket with candy was waiting at home. Last week, we gathered at my husband's family for a Passover Seder. And of course, Muslim friends are observing Ramadan now. Grand religious narratives still hold some sway in our humanist lives. Resurrection comes from the Anglo-French resurrection. Originally, the word was used in Christian context to refer to the rising of Christ from the dead. The word eventually began to be used more generally in the senses of resurgence or revival. Its Latin root, surgere, means to rise. The concept of a dying and rising God appears most often in religions of the ancient Near East. The oldest known example is the Sumerian myth of Inanna's descent to the underworld to see her sister. For 3 days and 3 nights, she is dead until resurrected with the help of her father. Given the abundance of scholarly work devoted to this concept, it clearly occupies a lot of thought and resonates for many, religious or not. The image of rising from the dead, the metaphor of conquering death, and the poetry of hope are powerful. Here's a poem that many of you have certainly heard before. It has become a contemporary anthem. Here are powerful words written by a powerful Black woman, words that tell us who she is, that dare us to truly hear and see her, and that invite us to accept the gifts she brings. Still I Rise by Maya Angelou. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and like suns, with a certainty of tides, just like hopes springing high, still I'll rise. Do you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your kindness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. Maya Angelou's poem is defiant and triumphant and awe-inspiring. It connects readers to her experience. It actually reaches out and grabs us in. That's what I believe a poem should do. And one of the poems I sent with a graphic to be screen shared, I hope can be put up now. It's what do you believe a poem should do? So if you can see it, I will also read it to you. This is a poem by Tazaki Shange. What do you believe a poem should do? Quite simply, a poem should fill you up with something, could make you swoon, stop in your tracks, change your mind, or make it up. A poem should happen to you like cold water or a kiss. Historian, philosopher, and poet Jennifer Michael Hecht writes in her latest book, The World Paradox, Embracing the Weirdness of Existence and the Poetry of Our Lives. Even though the supernatural is not real, the feelings of connection are. Poetry, she writes, can help us make up for the loss of the supernatural, can connect us to one another and to the meaning of our lives. Poetry takes in our whole outrageous situation as ambitious mortals. Poetry can offer cosmic perspective or specific advice. Poems remind us of the inner lives of others and thereby stoke empathy, much needed in times of strife. Poetry, she writes, may well be the best art to organize our hearts in the absence of religion because of its shared traits with prayer and meditation. Her book is called The Wonder Paradox, and she says the wonder paradox is the miracle that we are blown away by the experiences of consciousness, considering our contradictions and embracing the weirdness of existence feels when you are doing it as if it's a valuable thing to do. Poetry can help us to do it. Therefore, she encourages her readers to collect poems, lots of them, for different occasions, like weddings and memorials and holidays, but also for no reason at all, except that we like the way they sound and the way they make us feel. Over the years, I've collected over 1,000 pages of poems that I love, and I pull them out for different reasons, and I characterize them in different ways. There are parenting poems, there are poems for weddings and memorials and coming of age. So this morning, I selected several poems from my collection that reflect ethical humanist philosophies and values. Ones that recognize the supernatural is not real, but feelings of connection are. For me, poetry is the liturgy of our non-theistic religion of ethics. I grew up in a region of Western New York State that is still inhabited by members of the Haudenosaunee, also known as the Iroquois Confederacy. And I loved learning about the great peacemaker who brought together warring nations to bury their weapons of war under a pine tree. What hope can be found in theirs and other Indigenous peoples' stories? My next poem is one by the first Native American poet laureate, Joy Harjo, a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation in Oklahoma. Earth Eagle poem by Joe Harjo. To pray, you open your whole self to sky, to earth, to sun, to moon, to one whole voice that is you. And know there is more that you can't see, can't hear, can't know, except in moments steadily growing and in languages that aren't always sound, but other circles of motion. Like eagle, that Sunday morning over Salt River, circled in blue sky, in wind swept our hearts clean with sacred wings. We see you, see ourselves, and know that we must take the utmost care and kindness in all things. Breathe in, knowing we are made of all this, and breathe, knowing we are truly blessed because we were born and die soon within a true circle of motion, like eagle rounding out the morning inside us. We pray that it will be done in beauty, in beauty. Ethics is grounded in empathy. Ethical culture founder Felix Adler tells us, act so as to elicit the goodness in others and thereby in ourselves. We must use our imaginations to see connections and feel empathy. Here's a poem that elicits empathy for me. It's Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes over the prairies and deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese high in the clear blue air are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. And here's another poem about empathy, empathy towards one's enemies. It's called Champion the Enemy's Needs, and it's written by Kim Stafford. Ask about your enemy's wounds and scars. Seek his hidden cause of trouble. Feed your enemy's children. Learn their name for home. Repair their well. Learn their sorrow's history. Trace their lineage of the good. Ask them for a song. Make tea. Break bread. And when we consider empathy, I think it leads us to the emotion of love. And there are so very many poems about love. Here are two of my favorites. The first is by Ellen Bass. It's called The Thing Is. The thing is to love life, to love it even when you have no stomach for it, and everything you've held dear crumbles like burnt paper in your hands, your throat filled with the silt of it. When grief sits with you, its tropical heat thickening the air, heavy as water, more fit for gills than lungs. When grief weighs you like your own flesh, only more of it, an obesity of grief, and you think, how can a body withstand this? Then you hold life like a face between your palms, a plain face, no charming smile, no violet eyes, and you say, yes, I will take you. I will love you again. And here's one by Julie Cadwallader. It's called Remember. There is no such thing as quantity in love, my mother said, correcting me. No such thing as much love. You can't count it. No such thing as all my love. You can't contain it. Love expands. There's an endless supply. I love you, she said. That's sufficient. Sufficiency. What is enough? Well, the following poem speaks to me of ethical culture's philosophy. It's philosophy grounded in science, and it's by Anne Alexander Bigham, called It Is Enough. It is enough to know that the atoms of my body will remain, to think of them rising through the roots of a great oak, to live in leaves, branches, twigs, perhaps to feed the crimson peony, mint blue iris, the broccoli, or rest on water, freeze and thaw with the seasons. Some atoms might become a bit of fluff on the wing of a chickadee, to feel the breeze, know the support of air, and some might drift up and up into space, stardust, returning from whence it came. It is enough to know that as long as there is a universe, I am a part of it. We believe in science, don't we? So here's a poem about evolution by Eliza Griswold, and it's called Evolution. Was it dissatisfaction or hope that beckoned some of the monkeys down from the trees and onto the damp, forbidden musk of the forest floor? Which one tested his thumbs against the twig and awkwardly dug a grub from the soil? What did the tribe above think as it leaned on the slender branches, watching the others, frustrated, embarrassed, but pinching grubs with leathery fingers into their mouths? The moral is movement is awkward. The lesson is fumble. Poet Jane Hirshfield said, "Poetry is the attempt to understand fully what is real, what is present, what is imaginable, what is feelable, and how can I loosen the grip of what I already know to find some new, changed relationship. Through poetry, I know something new, and I have been changed." Here's Jane Hirshfield's poem, Optimism. More and more, I have come to admire resilience, not the simple resistance of a pillow whose foam returns over and over to the same shape, but the sinuous tenacity of a tree, finding the light newly blocked on one side, it turns in another, a blind intelligence, true. But out of such persistence arose turtles, rivers, mitochondria, figs, all this resinous, unretractable earth. So as I said earlier, I have a large collection of poems. Back when Garrison Keillor was doing the Writer's Almanac, I would get a poem every day, and I would go through it and select the ones that I would want to add to my collection. I'd read them aloud and feel how the words rolled around in my mouth, and I'd think, how can I use this? Can I use it in a coming Sunday platform? Would this be good for someone's wedding? Would it be something that would comfort a family in a memorial service? Would it be something perhaps for a baby naming or a coming of age? Or would it just be something that I want to come back to time and again to connect me to something? I'd ask, does the poem surprise me? Is there a confluence of thoughts and feelings? Are there words that I had never seen used in that context before? Does it help me to shift my perspective and see something in a totally different way? So I invite you to choose your own poems, please. Don't be embarrassed to read them out loud to yourself and anyone who will listen. And if you say to yourself, I'm just not a poetry person, I've heard people say that about meditation also, or mindfulness. Oh, I don't meditate. I don't understand mindfulness. That's okay, but try one out. Just try it out for size. See how it sounds to you. Here are some suggestions by Joyce Sutphin, and she calls it the poem of your life. So I offer this as a way of getting into it and thinking that there might really be a poem out there for you. The poem of your life is waiting for you to come along. Some spring, or maybe it's winter, in New York or Paris, on your way to meet someone who will change everything if you take the right train. If you look up from the book you are reading, if you say hello. The poem never leaves you, though sometimes it disappears for months or turns into a cloud or the moon. You forget about the poem for many days, and then one night, the moon is shining over snowy fields and you follow it, or it follows you. And that's when you remember that the moon was once a cloud, that was once a poem. The poem of your life is the one with the camping gear. She sleeps in a hammock whenever she can and speaks very softly. You'll have to listen carefully to your poem, but it's always worth it. She says what no one else says. Everyone will want to read the poem of your life. They'll read it over and over until they learn it by heart, which is the only way to know a true poem. And yours will not only be true, but beautiful and good. I, for one, find it difficult to memorize poems. I have always found it difficult to memorize. Even when I took piano lessons and was required to memorize a piece, I just couldn't do it. So I don't suggest requiring that of yourself to memorize a poem, but have it. You know, we've got these cool devices. You can put it on there and you can open it up and read it. I have a poem that I always choose, always, every day, no matter where, no matter when, it always speaks to me. And I often use it in a platform address. Those who would hear me when I was active at the New York Society for Ethical Culture would know that not every Sunday, but very often, this is the poem that I would read. So I hope that you too will find a favorite. This one is mine. It's Shoulders by Naomi Shihab Nye. A man crosses the street in rain, stepping gently, looking 2 times north and south, because his son is asleep on his shoulder. No car must splash him. No car drive too near to his shadow. This man carries the world's most sensitive cargo, but he's not marked. Nowhere does his jacket say, fragile, handle with care. His ear fills up with breathing. He hears the hum of a boy's dream deep inside him. We're not going to be able to live in this world if we're not willing to do what he's doing with one another. The road will only be wide. The rain will never stop falling. Well, April is, of course, National Poetry Month. When I first learned about this was when my children were in elementary school. PS 321, just a couple of blocks away in Brooklyn. celebrated National Poetry Month in a big way. Everyone was encouraged to carry their favorite poems in their pockets and share them with others. I remember my kids coming home from school. Mom, you can even stop Mr. Heaney. Mr. Heaney was the principal. You can even stop Mr. Heaney in the hallway and he'll read you a poem. He'll take it out of his pocket, he'll open it up and he will read it to you in the hallway, Mom. It was very cool then, and it still is. Try it. Put a poem in your pocket. You could also put one up on your refrigerator. And therefore, my closing poem is called Poem on the Fridge. It's by Paul Hostovsky. The refrigerator is the highest honor a poem can aspire to, the ultimate publication, as close to food as words can come. And this refrigerator poem is honored to be here beneath its own refrigerator magnet, which feels like a medal pinned to its lapel. Stop here a moment and listen to the poem humming to itself, like a refrigerator itself, the song in its head full of crisp, perishable notes that wither in air. The words to the song lined up here like a dispensary full of indispensable details, a jar of corrugated green pickles, an array of headless shrimp, fiery maraschino cherries, a fruit salad, vegetable platter, assortments of cheeses, and chilled French wines, a pink bottle of amoxicillin. The poem is infectious. It's having a party. The music, the revelry is seeping through this white door. And so, dear friends, I leave you with resurrecting poetry. Please resurrect it, sing with it, dance to it, collect it. And thank you so much for inviting me.